Welcome to LSC and LSC Sports Special. Now, if you've lived on the peninsula since the mid-50s and you've never heard of my special guest, Bud Porter, then you've been living under a rock. This guy was a born athlete, played sports his whole life, and has been involved in sports his whole life, not just in playing, but in other things that we'll get into. Bud, I appreciate you taking time coming in and talk to me. First of all, let's talk about your time at Hampton High School when you played. I called Suey Eason, you said, no, sir. We didn't call him Suey.
That was disrespectful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob, for having me. No, Coach Eason was Coach Eason or Mr. Eason. That's the respect that he demanded, and that's what we gave him, obviously. My years at Hampton were wonderful, Bob. You know, we, growing up in Hampton back in the 50s, and my sisters who had a couple ahead of me, in the 40s and 50s, Hampton High School football was the biggest thing going.
But that was the only high school for you guys on the peninsula at that time.
That is correct. That is correct. And you know, I remember my junior high school coach at Buckrow, who was originally from Pennsylvania, griping that he had to run the double wing formation in junior high school because Coach Eason demanded that the two junior high schools train us by running the double wing. So by the time we got to Hampton, we knew the numbering system, the hole system, which number for which hole and which back, etc. So we had to play as everything down pat by the time we got to the 10th grade at Hampton.
Was that Joe Beck by any chance?
Joe Beck was my junior high school coach, and he was probably the second or third year at Buckrow, and he was a tough, mean guy.
Yeah, he was. I remember.
But we
Joe.
loved him too. We loved him too.
But so when you got into Hampton High School, you were already involved in the offense and the defense because of what Eason was doing, and that's great.
Yes, it was. We like I say, we were trained from the 7th grade, his system, so we knew it pretty good. And one of the things about Coach Eason that perhaps doesn't get a lot of credit was that he did something over and over and over so many times. You know, as a young kid, you don't understand why we have to keep running the same play. But it was the perfection that he was looking for, and the fact that we could literally blindfold ourselves and run these plays in the dark. We were the only team, of course, the teams were Hampton, Newport News High School, and Warwick High School. When it rained, we practiced underneath the stadium. He used the concrete walls as defensive linemen, so we had to run between the concrete walls. And I won't tell you that a lot of people use that, what they use that stadium for during football games, so it wasn't fun underneath that stadium.
Well, now when you were playing, now you played wingback, which is like a halfback, but you also was the passer.
Well, Coach Eason, in his scheme of things, again, being well thought out, the tailback was the primary runner. He was the big guy, and the direct snap went to him, and he handed off to wingbacks. Coach Eason thought my friend Danny Bridges and I were co-captains of the team. He thought Danny's fingers were too fat and couldn't throw the ball, so ended up with me doing, taking the ball from Danny, running around in, faking an end run, stopping, throwing the ball down the field. It worked so much because we set it up by running the ball, and then the pass plays were wide open, and I had numerous guys to throw to. You had the other wing back, you had the two ends, and we occasionally had a blocking back. So it was it was so good that the pros used it and called it the shotgun. In high school, we were called antiquated, but then the pros decided the shotgun, which was really our double wing formation.
And the double wing came from the single wing. All right, let's talk about the players on that team, because I know you had some high school All-Americans, you had kids who went on to college and really excelled.
Bob, we had a wonderful team my senior year. We had, of our starting 11, which, by the way, as you pointed out, we played both ways. Most every guy played both ways. We never came out of the game. You were on the kickoff team, kickoff receiving team. You were on the punt team. You were on the extra point team, as well as playing offense and defense. Right. We had 10 seniors my senior year. We had one junior who was the other wing back opposite me. We had a junior by the name of Chris Hamburger, who was a lineman and a defensive end, as most know, went on to fame at University of North Carolina and about 14 years with the Washington Redskins.
Right.
But on my team, we had, which this is really unique, we had 2 ends that both of them made All-State. They made all Group 1 or All-State. John Ellerson was the finesse guy. Jimmy Stout was the raw bone talent, tough, hard-nosed, gritty kind of player. Demanded the ball, wanted me to throw him the ball every play, would work hard to get open. John was a finesse. He could finesse the defensive backs, get open. Both of them were open. It was fun, to try to decide who to throw the ball to.
I bet it was.
I mentioned to you earlier in the conversation, Jimmy Stout used to get mad at me. He'd come in the huddle and say, "You're not throwing the ball to me enough. You're throwing it to John Ellerson too much. Throw it to me some." And I'd say, "Okay, get open."
Get open, good.
Get open.
Good response.
But off that team, Bob, Jimmy Stout got a full scholarship to the University of Georgia.
Now tell me a little bit about how he got that. I thought that was unique.
Well, every Monday morning, after the Washington Redskins, back in those days, always played on Sunday, a gentleman by the name of Johnny Carsons, who played for the Washington Redskins, not the Johnny Carson on television, he would drive down to Hampton. He was a graduate of the University of Georgia, and every Monday he was at Hampton High School recruiting Jimmy Stout to go to the University of Georgia. It paid off, but Coach Wallace Butts was at Georgia, and he wanted Jimmy Stout to play for his team, and so he asked Johnny Carson to come from Washington every Monday morning.
How about that?
And met with John. Now, John Ellerson, our other end, was a high school All-American, Scholastic High School All-America. After we graduated from Hampton, he got a scholarship to West Point, which in those days, United States Military Academy, was big-time football power. John played 3 years there, was captain of the team his senior year. And I should point out a little side note, his little brother, Rich, who was about 6 years old when they were living here in Hampton, is now the current football coach at West Point.
Isn't that something?
That's a great story, yes.
That is great.
And I talk with John occasionally. He now lives in Florida, and he's real happy for the success his brother's having.
Well, that's super.
But Danny Bridges, the tailback on our team, got a full scholarship to Duke University. And for those who don't remember, in those days,
Duke was tough.
Duke was a power. Duke had played in the 1957 Orange Bowl. And while Danny was there, he made a little TV headlines because his picture got in an AP photo with Elvis Presley when they played in the Cotton Bowl. Danny's mug was with Elvis Presley, so that was a pretty nice deal. But we had, I in turn went on to the College of William Murray and played at William Murray, which was a Division I school and playing big-time football in those days. We played Florida State and VPI and everybody else. Our center, our 2 guards, and 1 tackle got scholarships to Hargrave Military Academy, Fork Union Military Academy, and a couple of those guys went on to colleges and played colleges later on. So we had, out of the starting 10 seniors, 9 of them got scholarships to college to play football after high school, yes. And of course, like I say again, everybody knows what happened to Chris Hamburger.
Right. Well, now, you didn't just play football, but I'm talking to you, you were not a basketball player, which is unusual because usually you play football, basketball, and then baseball. But you didn't play the basketball. And why was that?
Well, it just so happened, in the neighborhood I lived in, which was East Hampton, and I'm a proud East Hamptonian, but my guys, we played baseball and softball half the year, and we played football half the year. We didn't play it with the round ball. Now, 9 blocks, 10 blocks down the road from where we live, those guys played a lot of basketball. But we played softball from springtime all the way up to fall, and then fall we started playing football, and we played football all the way to spring and started playing baseball and softball. Softball was big in my neighborhood because we had one church, and all the kids that grew up in that neighborhood went to that church. They had a softball team, and we were expected to play softball for that team. So we trained early, and it was a big deal to make that softball team and play for that softball team.
All right, now let me ask you, just in your expertise, kind of the difference between when you played football and what you see now. I know the athletes are bigger, stronger, faster, and that goes from the high school right on up to the pros. But what do you see are the differences than when you played?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, Bob, that are really big. Number one, when we came along, we didn't have weights. We didn't know what working out with weights even was. We were a calisthenics program.
Right.
We did jumping jacks and push-ups and set-ups and that kind of a physical education thing. We didn't have anything to build bulk or build muscle except running around our neighborhood and beating up on one another. but we just did calisthenics. We did a lot of running. We were more lithe and skinnier type guys than the kids today who have weight rooms in high school. They have weight rooms available to them. They have, and another thing, they have all these special drinks that
The nutrients.
the vitamins that we didn't have.
Right.
You talking about taking a vitamin in 1957? Are you kidding? You had to be sick.
You had to be, that's what I was going to say.
And
sick.
so now these kids not only have that, but they have all these special drinks with electrolytes. In 1957, electrolyte might have been something running down the street. I don't know, you know.
Something you hang from a Christmas
So
tree.
these kids have all these things going for them, and they have 24-hour coverage of sports so they can perfect themselves and they can watch film and that type of thing. Hey, we got together on Sunday night after playing for Coach Easton on Friday night. The team get together on Sunday night and we watched the game that we played. We critiqued our mistakes and we set up a plan for whoever we were going to play the following week. We never got a chance to go in a film room and look at our moves and perfect our moves like these kids do today.
Right.
Something else that may have hurt us a little bit, we were very Spartan and we were not allowed water on the field, period. Now these kids have water breaks and it's all good, but I don't know that we could take a kid today and transform him back to 1957 if he could make it. Because
It'd be tough.
everything's air conditioned today, you know, wasn't in our day, and we were used to being outside. We were used to the Spartan way.
Right.
We never got near a water bucket. If you did, Coach Easton might have you run up and down that field, and that was not the thing we wanted to do.
Well, tell me a little bit about what you think is the best team that you have seen at Hampton High School.
Well,
And we're not trying to hurt anybody's feelings.
no, I understand that. When I was a kid growing up, you know, all I heard was Dick Carneal, and there was another guy who played with Dick Carneal that I gravitated to by the name of Tommy Edmonds. Tommy Edmonds was a wingback, and he was like a Mighty Mouse with Dick Carneal. But growing up, those guys were just huge, huge people to me, and to emulate them or be like them was something. Today, having watched Hampton through the years from the 60s and 70s and 80s, there's no question in my mind that the Ronald Curry era at Hampton and Coach Mike Smith, what they have done is absolutely incredible. I mean, Ronald Curry was probably the greatest athlete I think I probably will ever see in my life. Not only was he a tremendous, outstanding athlete, but he was a heck of a good person. He had a lot of character,
Yes.
a lot of morals, you know, a very straight, honest kind of kid you want your
Down
son
to
to be
earth.
with. Down
You
to
just-
earth.
you don't- there-
Wonderful, easy to talk to,
Right.
very humble, remembered where he came from. If he didn't, his grandma would put him in the right
Right,
place.
yeah.
You know, I remember a question someone asked Ronald Curry's grandmother if she came to watch him play on Friday nights, and she said, "No, I don't see him much on Friday nights, but I know where he is on Sunday morning." He was in church, and,
Yeah.
you know. But that was a greater, probably the greatest teams in that time.
Right.
Because Ronald Curry was a talent, but he had a lot of talent around him. There were
Yes, he
some
did.
great kids that played
Yeah.
with him. And now I think we've got a real good team this year. I don't want to put a quiet on anybody, but Phoebus better watch out because I think Hampton's coming back this year. We finally got us some running backs, and we've got some good linemen. And this quarterback, we've got an outstanding young man, and we're going to be tough this year.
Well, it's going to be an interesting game either way because both of them have got good teams. Well, let's make a real skip here and go on to what your time at William & Mary and what it was like and the differences that you found there than you did at high school.
Well, one of the stories that I shared with you, we talked about was, You know, when I went to college, I had never played T-formation football. I mean, I played the double wing all my life. I'd never seen a T-formation, didn't know how to play T-formation football. There was a man by the name of Bill Chambers, who was a basketball coach at Newport News High School, who took the head basketball job at William Murray the year before I went up to William Murray. And Coach Chambers took the time to talk to the football coaches and tell them, hey, I know this guy Porter, and I know he can't play T-formation football. And so the football coaches turned me over to Coach Chambers, and Coach Chambers took a couple of weeks with me in the summer, taught me how to play T-formation football, how to get down, how to hold my hands, how to look the right way, how to take the ball from the left side and the right side. I mean, I've never forgotten that because he didn't have to do that.
Right.
He was a wonderful guy. For him to take the time and come and teach me and give me a big break, which I needed, believe me. When I got there, the talent was very, very good. I ended up, Bob, one of my greatest moments there, I won the Southern Conference Punting Championship while I was there, and I beat a guy named Paul McGuire. Paul McGuire was playing for the Citadel, and for those of you who don't know, played about 12, 14 years with Buffalo.
That's right.
And then did Monday Night Football. And as a commentator, it tickled me that I beat him every year, and he's in the pros and I went home, you know. But I led the nation for 6 weeks in a row. I had about a 48-yard punting average. My last couple of games played in the mud, and my average came down, ended up being about 44, 45 yards a game. But that was good for me since I'd never kicked until I got to college.
Well, to me, you know, you've got so many stories. We could sit here all day and talk about your different stories. But when you went to college, it was a lot different than when in high school. And I'm not just talking about formation. I'm talking about athletes. Now, you were surrounded by a lot of good athletes, but you saw athletes from other teams that you played were much better than the ones you played against in high school.
No question. You know, now VMI football is not something that a lot of people other than the alumni talk about. But when I went to William Murray, VMI was the Southern Conference champion for like 3 years in a row. They beat the pants off of everybody, including VPI. And they had a quarterback in 1960 who was 6'5", and he was from Mississippi, and he came to the state of Virginia to play football at VMI. They had a big old bruising fullback, Sam Woolwine, who was from out in Southwest Virginia. They were loaded with talent. They had great talent. And VMI recruited, John Ellerson was considering VMI before he went to West Point.
Right.
But they were a big-time program. And I'll give you an example, too. When I started as a freshman, of course, we had to scrimmage the varsity every day. We had 7 players on our varsity football team that had fought in Korea and had come back to college on the GI Bill. Now, let me tell you something. When you're an 18-year-old freshman going up against a fullback who's killed people in a war, when he says something, you say, yes, sir. Which way?
A little different.
A little different, and tough guys, raw-boned guys. These guys, of course, half of my football team was from the state of Pennsylvania, and they were tough, raw-boned guys, and they just were tough football players. Yeah. It was quite an experience, and I have a lot of wonderful friends from those days, and we have a football reunion every year, and I get a chance to see these guys and play a little golf with them. Whole lot easier now than it was then back when you had to battle them every day on that field.
I hear you. Well, we're going to take a real quick break, and we're going to come right back because I've got 3 other subjects I'm going to talk to Bud about. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to LSC Sports Special with my special guest, Bud Porter. We've been talking and reminiscing about Hampton High School when he was there and at William & Mary. But now we're going to talk about his time with Fox Hill Fast Pitch Softball, which was, when I came on Peninsula, this was a big, big deal. I'm not kidding you. And I got to see this young man play catcher with a lot of good athletes. So let's talk a little bit about your time at Fox Hill.
Well, Bob, I think first we should point out that Fox Hill softball, fast pitch, big time, started in the 40s with a group of gentlemen in Fox Hill that built the field and built the stadium and put it together. Fox Hill kind of hit the big time in 1955 when they found a pitcher in Fort Eustis, a guy by the name of Bob Saunders, who helped put Fox Hill really on the map. I started at Fox Hill in 1961, was my first year. That was my rookie year, and I had the pleasure to be able to play for 16 years until the 70s. We had some great teams, some great guys. We played the best fast pitch softball in the United States of America. I sometimes think people here don't realize what good caliber softball we played. I mean, there was none finer. I've had people come up to me and say, well, what class did you play? You know, what are you talking about? What class?
Well, you got national exposure. There's not a class to get national exposure. You just got to be good.
We played in a number of different leagues, from the Virginia, Carolina leagues, but really in the 70s, we played in the Atlantic Seaboard Major Softball League. We played in the Southern Division, and this is funny, Bob. The Southern Division was Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Washington, D.C., and us in Virginia.
And you were the Southern.
We were the Southern. The Northern Division was from Massachusetts down to New Jersey.
Okay.
But yes, we played the top teams in the nation. And we played every Friday and Saturday nights and a lot of Wednesday nights. And we played from May until September. And you played all those games for one purpose, and that was to get into the regional tournament, which was the champions from that 5-state area I just named. And they rotated it around, and you had to win the regional tournament to go to the national tournament. Now, it's tough enough to beat the top teams from Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Virginia, but when the national champion comes from Pennsylvania and you got to go through them, it was even tougher.
Wow. Yeah.
But in 1965, we won our first regional tournament, and a Fox Hill team, the first Fox Hill team to ever go to a world tournament. It was called a world tournament.
Okay, it wasn't national, it was
world.
tournament.
In 1965, we went to the world tournament, which was played in Clearwater, Florida, in the Philadelphia Phillies Stadium. The city of Clearwater sponsored their softball team, paid these guys, you know, but the world tournament was played there. Matter of fact, the first two teams we beat were from Canada, were Canadian teams, and then we beat a couple of teams from California. We ended up in 6th place in our first year ever going to a world tournament, and we were 6th in the United States of America, 6th. That's pretty good.
Awesome.
We went back to the United States National Men's Fast Pitch in 1967 in Springfield, Missouri. We went back to Springfield in 1969, and we played in Seattle, Washington in 1973. I had the good fortune to play on those teams. Personally, I think 1969 was our best team ever and our greatest year. With the stroke of luck, we could have won a whole deal. And I say that tongue-in-cheek because you open up the tournament, the host team and the defending national champion always play two other teams. You draw out of the hat to see who those teams are. Our manager in 1967 drew the defending national champions.
Oh, wow.
In 1969, he draws the defending national champion, Clearwater, Florida Bombers, the New York Yankees of fast pitch softball, and we beat them. We beat them 3-1 in 1969, opening night in Springfield, Missouri. We sent them packing, and the people of Springfield fell in love with us because their team got beat.
So they had to have somebody to cheer for.
So they started cheering for us. We came back, Bob, the following night, on a Saturday night. We played the number 2 team in the nation, Oxnard, California. We packed them, beat them pretty good, sent them packing. We thought, okay, we're going to get a day off to rest here. We had to come back on Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock, we played the Armed Forces All-Stars. Now, let me tell you what the Armed Forces All-Stars is: the best of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard, the Girl Scouts. I don't know. They were all, it was the best of the Armed Forces. They had 4 all-world pitchers on their team. We played them for 7 innings. We were ahead 1-0 in the bottom of the 7th inning. To set this up for you so it doesn't sound like sour grapes from me, we've got 1 out. They've got a runner on second base. The batter hits a pop-up behind third base. Our shortstop, Joey Lawrence, goes behind third base. I got it. He catches the ball, out number 2, and he looks, and the guy from second base takes off towards third. We don't believe it. He fires a line drive shot to our third baseman, Don Weingrad, catches the ball, rakes it up the guy's leg. He's out. We think it's over. We've won 1-0. The umpire down the third baseline had gone back with Joey to make sure he caught the ball okay. He didn't see it. He points to the home plate. I'm standing at home plate with the umpire. He's standing next to me and says, "Your call." And he goes, "Duh, safe." Well, it was so bad.
Whoa.
People in Springfield threw cans, bottles on the field for 15 minutes before we got order restored. To make a long story short, we ended up playing 21 innings. We played 14 more innings. Ron Peterson pitched the whole game. We started at 1 o'clock.
The whole game?
He pitched the whole game. Every one of our players played the whole game. They used 4 pitchers. We used 1. They beat us. In the 21st inning. It was about 20 minutes to 7. We'd started at 1 o'clock that afternoon. So we lose that game, and we go into the losers bracket. We finally get a day off. We lose and get a day off. We come back. We faced Mesa, Arizona. Ron Peterson pitched a perfect game. He never shook me off on one pitch. A perfect game in a national tournament was only the 2nd time it had ever been done. So we win that game. We got our confidence back. We figure, okay, we're going to come back and win this thing anyway. We ended up playing Aurora, Illinois, the 2nd team to Clearwater in national champions. Ron Peterson pitched a 1-hitter, and they beat us 1-0.
Isn't that something?
We got 4 hits. They got 1. Of course, the 1 was a changeup that hung, and a guy had a home run off beat, and they beat us and sent us home. We finished 6th. We could have won it. We should have won it. And I'll tell you the final point to this story. They sent the umpire home. He didn't officiate another game, and we thought he was our friend because we found out he was from North Carolina.
But want to show. Well, let's talk about some.
I think we could have won it that year.
Yeah.
Well, you asked me about the players.
Right.
Again, going back to my original statement, not really thinking the people here know how good this was that we played because we were local. I was a catcher. I'm a Hampton boy. First base was Ronnie Weber, another Hampton boy. Second base was Jesse Kersey, a Newport News High School guy. Joey Lawrence was our shortstop, another Hampton boy. Our third baseman was Don Weingrad, who originally was from Baltimore, but had been transferred on his job to Hampton, been living in Hampton 20 years. Left fielder was Don Brandt, a Newport News High School boy. Keith Goodson was in center field. He was a Pocosin boy. And we had 2 or 3 guys that rotated in right field. Doug Stroop was one of them, was a Hampton boy. And Ron Peterson, our pitcher, had come from North Carolina. By the way, he married a Hampton girl and still lives in Hampton. We were a local team of local guys. When we played Clearwater, the first baseman was from Connecticut, second baseman was from Canada, third baseman was from California, shortstop was from Arizona, pitchers were from Canada, Australia. Okay, I mean the best.
So they've been recruited.
The best money could buy.
Yeah.
Aurora, Illinois, Ray Bestis, Seal Masters in Stratford, Connecticut. They were. You go down their lineup: California, New Mexico, Arizona. Their first baseman was from North Carolina. Wow. They got jobs in the factory. They got paid to play softball. We were taking days off from our jobs to go on trips to play.
Yeah.
We were using our vacation to play softball.
Isn't that something?
And we played, Bob, with the best in the world. And any of these teams that we played, they'll tell you, we were as good as any team they ever played.
Well, I'll tell you, I knew you guys were great, but I didn't know that story, and that's a great story. Well, let's switch from fast pitch. Let's go to the Peninsula Sports Club, where you are a past president 2 times.
2 times.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because that's very interesting to me on how this thing is evolved and how you recognize not only the sports that the athletes that play sports in the state, but out of state and whatever, and I think that's important.
Well, originally the club started, there were a couple of very civic-minded individuals, and Herbie Morwitz being one, Charlie Kamaski, who was a Daily Press sports editor back in those days. They had the idea of starting this Peninsula Sports Club. It wasn't until the club started in the late 40s, but it wasn't until the 50s that they started honoring local teams. As a matter of fact, I was on the All-Peninsula football team, and the sports club honored us in 1957, and the All-Peninsula team were the guys from Warwick High School, Newport News High School, and Hampton High School.
Right.
As you pointed out, that was the only thing the sports club did. The All-Peninsula, they didn't do baseball and basketball, just football. And that evolved. Now, we give like 35 to 40 awards at our headliners night. We honor outstanding high school male, females. We honor college in-state, male, female, college out-of-state, male, female. You know, we have some wonderful, great, talented athletes that come off this peninsula. And they go everywhere. And we like to bring them back and honor them and tell the community about how wonderful these kids are and what a great job they're doing. We even have a Sports Person Emeritus Award, so we go back now and try to find these guys from the 40s and 50s before we honored, and we honor a lot of these guys. Like this past year, we honored Buddy Lex, who graduated from Newport News High School in 1947, probably one of the greatest athletes to ever come out of Newport News. In addition, we give a scholarship now. We give a $1,000 scholarship to a local kid. He's got to write us essays. We critique the essays very, very soundly by a group of hard-nosed people. It's competitive to get, we get some wonderful stories from these kids. And we give $1,000 every year, so we're giving out $4,000 every year in scholarships to athletes that otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. We're involved in other situations where we have coaches' nights, and we try to get in with the high school coaches and recognize the high school coaches and their long-term service and how well they serve our peninsula.
Right. You know, I think that's great, but when we were here the last time, you started talking about the Lower Peninsula Hall of Fame, and I was really dumbfounded because I didn't know anything about it. So this is something else that you're involved in.
It's funny we're talking about that because just this past week, we've just elected a new class which will go in May 2011. The Lower Peninsula Hall of Fame is a well-kept secret. Not too many people know about it, and I should correct myself. It's the Lower Peninsula Athletic Hall of Fame.
Okay.
The plaques are in the Hampton Coliseum. It started off, we elected a class of 11, 12, 13 people back in the 70s, and there was a lot of years that went by before we elected another class. And now we've gotten it down. We have a committee, and we meet, and we elect a class every 3 years.
Okay.
So we now have some continuity, and we have 6 applicants that are going in. I'm not at liberty to divulge those names to you because they haven't all been notified yet, but we have a wonderful class. I'll tell you this, it's a great, great class with some very old and some very new. It's a good mixture of people that have been elected. There'll be information in the paper and through the city later on how to find out about how to partake in that. But it is another good thing. We're trying to find a home for that, and we're in the middle of a home where you can go see it, Bob.
Right.
For instance, if guests come to visit you, you can't go out to the Hampton Coliseum and get in unless it's open.
Right.
We're trying to work with the city to find a home. Hopefully we're going to work out something with the Boo Williams facility.
Okay.
and we'll be able to partner with Boo and have it set up in his facility, which is open 24/7, and you can go out there and see these plaques and see who's in the Hall of Fame and say, by gosh, there's Henry Jordan. I remember him.
Right.
He was an All-Pro with the Green Bay Packers,
Right.
you know, from Warwick High School. Or you can see, hey, there's Ronald Curry from Hampton High School.
Right.
So hopefully we're going to get more known and better known in this community, because it's a wonderful thing, and the city of Hampton does a great job in sponsoring this and supporting this.
Well, Bud, I appreciate you taking time to come in here and sit down and talk to me. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I know when my wife was your office manager, I'd go in and she'd say, don't come over here, because you and Bud just going in, you just talk sports, and I can't get anything going on. But you need to get involved and find out what's going on in this Sports Hall of Fame, the sports club, and the athletes here on the peninsula. And people like Bud Porter keep it going. And we just appreciate him taking time coming here and talk to us today. And I can't thank you enough for your time, Bud. And if you want the best in high school athletics, look at LSC, your local sports channel, because we've got the best, and they show some of the best athletes that's come through the peninsula. This is Bob Hintz with my special guest, Bud Porter, saying good afternoon.